Jalen Ramsey in the first 3 days of training camp looks like a complete and utter bargain. Considering what they gave up for him, obviously Minka Fitzpatrick was a fan favorite, but he already looks like well worth what they're paying him and well worth what they gave up to get him. We talked about it after the first 2 practices, but they're moving him around, nickel, outside, safety, and then on day 3, he gets an interception on Aaron Rodgers during team drills where he just undercuts the throw, read it perfectly, and it was the first play of the second portion of team drills, and the defense went wild, fans went crazy. So yeah, it's pretty evident that he was, obviously it's just training camp and everything. We're only on day 3. We haven't seen it on the field yet in terms of playing against other teams. But if this translates into live game action and he's making these splash plays, which again, love Minka Fitzpatrick, but he hasn't been making those over the last couple of years. If they get that back in the form of Jalen Ramsey, absolute win of a trade for the Steelers, and he's been awesome so far. So that's been great news for the Steelers, is how awesome Jalen Ramsey's looked. Secondary-wise as well, Joey Porter Jr. continues to look really well. During, I think it was team drills, or it might have been 7-on-7s, one of the two. Aaron escaped, threw a ball deep to DK Metcalf down the right sideline. Metcalf caught it going out of bounds, though, falling on his back, caught it. Fans went crazy for the catch, but it was very clearly out of bounds. Joey Porter Jr. was very quick to let DK hear about it, very quick to let the fans know about it. He was kind of playing the heel a little bit, letting the fans know that that was very much an incomplete pass because it wasn't caught in bounds. Joey Porter Jr. continues to look really strong so far through 3 days of camp. I'll tell you, though, one guy whose name I didn't say too much in the first 2 days that I said a lot on day 3 was Juan Thornhill. He had multiple pass breakups, including one that was deep for Roman Wilson, and he came across and prevented a big gain. So he was making plays. Chuck Clark, the new safety, also made a really nice pass breakup in the pass game. So a little bit of a welcome to Pittsburgh moment there for Chuck Clark. They are getting plays from all over the defense. And the secondary especially, that's been, even like when it got good briefly, right? When they had Joe Hayden and Steven Nelson and Mike Hilton, the strong suit of the team still remained to be the edge rushers in the interior with Cam Hayward. Right now, that balance feels so much more equal, where it's not so much weighted to one side with the edge rushers in the interior. And while those two groups are still very good, the secondary has been really awesome. With Ramsey, with Porter, Juan Thornhill, and now Chuck Clark making plays as well. This looks like a very good unit. And, for all any sort of like frustrations that people might have hearing or watching the offense struggle a little bit, it also comes with the caveat of, well, the Steelers offense isn't going to play the Steelers defense every week, but the Steelers defense is awesome. They're not going to play offenses that great, they aren't going to play defenses that great every week. And it's, still the install portion of training camp where everything's still, pretty fresh. Haven't started preseason yet. So, this is overall a good thing that the defense has been this dominant, because it has been dominant through the first 3 days. Another note is that every time Will Howard steps on the field, people love him. He had another touchdown pass during 7 shots today. So this isn't to say that Will Howard's going to become the starting quarterback. I know I've reiterated that a lot. I might sound like a broken record, but it is worth saying to hopefully help people avoid getting way in over their heads with this, where 2 things can be true. Will Howard, you can love him. Very fun, like story and whatnot. But, there's certainly a ceiling on what he's going to do this year and next year for that matter. They're going to draft a quarterback in the first round next year. I don't expect Will Howard to be the future of the franchise. But could he be a good backup? Absolutely. And he's showing signs of that as well. Mason Rudolph's looked pretty good in camp as well. So both of their backup quarterbacks have looked very good, which is good to hear. I almost forgot. Another secondary member had a nice little splash play. Rookie out of Central Michigan, Dante Kent, 7th-round pick, had an interception during 7-on-7s on Skylar Thompson. So the rookie out of Central Michigan, the 7th-round pick, had his first big splash play at training camp. I'm sure that felt very good. Celebrated with the defense. That was very, very nice to see. Derek Harmon had a play during team drills where he absolutely blew up a run play. That was a continuation from what he looked like on day 2. He's had a really strong start to camp. Dean Lowry had a really big play where he just plowed through Zach Frazier. And if it was a live game situation, that's easily like a 5-6 yard loss in the run. So Dean Lowry made a really nice play. You could hear the defense say, okay, Dean, everybody was really excited about it. Dean Lowry, not, the most talkative or loud guy or big ego guy, but you could tell that he has the respect of that team because as soon as he made that play, everybody was very excited for him. So good play by the rotational defensive lineman to see that. Any sort of other stories that we can touch on? I'm just looking at my notebook right now, seeing if there's any big things that I missed. Jonnu Smith was a full participant, and that was good. The first couple of days he did walk through and then wasn't participating and the actual practice portion. So he was a full participant today. He talked to the media earlier in the day, and they asked him about Jalen Ramsey. And I thought that he gave a really good quote talking about, his teammate that, he was teammates with him in Miami and all, they obviously come over together via trade. And, there was some talk about Ramsey's character and whatnot. And Jonnu Smith somewhat set the record straight with how he feels about Jalen Ramsey. Let me pull up the full quote here just so I'm not leading you astray. Jonnu Smith said, he's a great guy. You get a lot of people who have Jalen misunderstood, obviously, with all the stuff that went down in Miami and what kind of things were portrayed. That was my first year with Jalen, but the guy just wants to win, and you want guys like that around. So thus far, we've got to see a lot of Jalen Ramsey making plays, but today was the first time that we got to see Jonnu Smith kind of in the fold. He was targeted a few times and whatnot, didn't really make any sort of huge splash plays, but it was good to see him, on the field and whatnot throughout the entirety of camp. Or sorry, the entirety of practice. Again, we'll just keep going down my notebook here. I think, let's see. Oh, Alex Highsmith batted down a pass of Aaron Rodgers to close out 7 shots, so the defense won 4-3. Yeah, that continues the trend of the defense being dominant, which they have been. The defense has dominated the first 3 days of this camp. And again, I don't want it to sound like I'm putting down the offense and sound doom and gloom about the offense because, it's 3 days into camp. They're going to get better. This is an offense with a lot of new pieces. It's going to take some time to figure it out, but it's okay to shine a light on how great the defense has been. Ramsey with the interception on Rodgers, Joey Porter Jr. with the lockdown coverage on DK Metcalf, Dante Kent getting involved in 7-on-7s with the interception, Juan Thornhill playing well, and the defensive line. Derek Harmon looks really good. Nick Faribault has been all over Jack Sawyer this week. I haven't kept a keen eye on Jack Sawyer, but Nick Faribault has been very adamant that he's had a very good few days to start camp. So this has been a very, very promising start for the Steelers defense. Again, we would like to see a little bit more from the offense. Hopefully once the pads go on, or even, tomorrow's practice or, and before the pads come on, even just a few things that get better. And it's not to say that nothing has gotten better because, talking about 7 shots, Aaron threw 2 touchdowns. Caleb Johnson's looked really good throughout camp. They're getting Kenneth Gainwell involved a little bit more with the during team drills and during 7-on-7s as a receiving back, which has been good. They're trying to find ways to utilize everybody. All these new additions. And again, there's a lot of new additions to get acquainted to the offense that weren't there last year. DK Metcalf wasn't there last year. Jonnu Smith wasn't there last year. Kenneth Gainwell, Caleb Johnson, Roman Wilson was on the roster, but he was hurt for the majority of the year. So, there's Robert Woods wasn't there last year. There's a lot of guys that got to get acquainted with the offense, the terminology, the timing with one another, the chemistry with one another. So, these things take time. And it's better to be talking about growing pains on July 26th than talking about it week 1 after a loss in New York. So get all the kinks out now, work on it for the next month, and get it to be as crisp as you possibly can. And then we'll see what that end product looks like when they go to the Meadowlands to play the Jets. So I'm not worried about any sort of, inconsistencies that the offense has had, because that was expected. There's a unit full of guys that haven't played together. It's a new quarterback, a new number 1 receiver, a new number 2 receiver, a new number 2 tight end who's going to be a big part of the passing game. Another new veteran receiver with Robert Woods. There's a lot of new guys, and it's going to take time. So not worried about that in the slightest. Everything will be A-okay when it comes to the Steelers. And some people might say that's the optimist in me. If you followed me for any amount of time, you know that I tend to be a very, very much a realist, which some people might confuse as me being pessimistic. I'm going to be real when it comes to them. And, I think in my coverage for this team over the last number of years, I have been. And the realist in me says it's 3 days of training camp with a lot of new pieces on offense, and they're doing fine. The results will come, and I would much rather talk about them struggling in late July than, mid-September. So don't worry about hearing any sort of struggles or inconsistencies with the offense, because it'll get worked out. That's what this time of year is for. Aaron knows that. Arthur Smith knows that. All the guys on offense know that. It'll be fine. So let's talk about the biggest standouts so far. Already talked about Jalen Ramsey, but I'll give him another shout. Just tremendous so far. Looks more than worth the price of admission. Very happy that they have him. That's been my short takeaway through 3 days of seeing Jalen Ramsey in a Steelers uniform. Happy that he's there, because he's played great so far. Derek Harmon, I talked about him yesterday a lot, but he looks like the real deal. And if he comes out swinging the way that he has in training camp, a defensive line of Cam Hayward, Derek Harmon, and Keanu Benton, alongside TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, that could be the best defensive line in football. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing what that could look like. Joey Porter Jr. has had a terrific first 3 days. Not just on day 3, locking down DK Metcalf. He, on day 1 and day 2, had multiple passes hit him in the hands. He hasn't come down with an interception yet, but he's been in position to pick off multiple passes in team drills and 7 shots. He has been absolutely the definition of a lockdown corner. And going into year 3, he's a guy who's kind of hovering around that top 10 cornerback conversation. I would put him in there. Some people might not, and that's fine. I understand that I'm a little bit biased when it comes to that. But the way that he's playing right now, he looks very keen on taking one of those top 10 spots in terms of cornerbacks around the NFL, which is good news. Caleb Johnson has been another big standout. Didn't really have anything explosive happen on day 3, but through the first 2 days, and we talked about it on the show yesterday, every time he touches the ball, it feels like something explosive has happened. And after a run on day 2, where he got to the edge, broke off a run for more yardage than he had any right getting, Deshaun Elliott got chirpy, but in a positive way. He dapped him up, kind of gave him a little bit of a headbutt of all right, we see you. So Caleb Johnson, I would never guarantee that a player is going to be great, because we just never know that that's going to be the case. To me, he is as close to a guarantee for a running back that the Steelers have had in a long time. He looks the part. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, and he's explosive. And not a lot of people gave him credit for that coming out of Iowa. A lot of people said he was a clone of Najee Harris. Everything that I have seen from Caleb Johnson through 2 days, I'm not seeing Najee Harris when I watch him. He'll get to the second level and hit that next gear. And that has been very exciting to watch when it comes to Caleb Johnson. I think that the usage of Roman Wilson, throughout the first 3 days, it's pretty clear that he is slotted in as the number 2 outside receiver, with Calvin Austin being the slot guy. I kind of figured that's how it was going to be coming in to training camp. And again, it's going to be his job to lose. We'll see if they decide to bring anybody else in. And if they do, it'll be in classic Steelers fashion where they wait until final cuts and see if there's anybody worth giving a shout to. They did that a few years ago with Desmond King. The Texans cut Desmond King. They brought him in, didn't do a thing with him. They cut him, and then he went back to Houston and helped them win a playoff game that year. But we have seen the Steelers be active when it comes to final cuts and, perhaps looking for a receiver who might be a guy who gets cut that we're not talking about right now, but could become available. One name did go down. We've talked about Treylon Burks a lot, especially last year in terms of guys that they could trade for. The Titans were all but certainly going to move on from him one way or the other, whether that be a trade or an all-out release. He suffered a fractured collarbone in the Titans practice on Saturday, so he'll be out for quite a while. And if they do want to move him, they won't be able to do that for quite a bit. So, and I didn't see too many people. I didn't expect too many teams to be throwing their names into the ring for Treylon Burks to begin with. My assumption was that teams were going to wait until final cuts, and if he was cut, then sure, you give him a shot, you bring him in, keep him on the practice squad maybe, or as a depth piece, but teams weren't going to give up assets for Treylon Burks. So now that's another name that you can scratch off as a potential Steelers addition because he broke his clavicle. So that's another thing to keep an eye on, is if they decide to bring in another receiver or not. I'll give Will Howard a shout for a standout. He's made the most of his reps. He had a touchdown pass to I always forget this fella's name. Let me pull up the Steelers depth chart right now. It's JJ Galbraith, the tight end, backup tight end. They've had somewhat of a connection over the first 3 days. He also hit, and this is a great name for everybody listening, multiple times on day 3. Will Howard hooked up with Montana Lamonius Craig, wide receiver that the Steelers signed during the offseason. They've had multiple connections during 7-on-7s, and I want to say 1 in team drills. But yeah, Montana Lamonius Craig with a couple catches today from Will Howard on day 3. But those are my biggest standouts thus far. I don't believe I'm forgetting anybody. I know I said 3 and I rattled off like 6, but there's been plenty of standouts thus far. I'm going to write about it as well over Behind the Steel Curtain. Be sure to go and check out all the written work there, the site of which I am the managing editor for SB Nation's dedicated coverage to the Steelers. So be sure to watch all of read all of that work from everybody on my staff there. And also some news, the Hall of Honor class of 2025 for the Steelers announced today. Joey Porter, Marquise Pouncey, Ben Roethlisberger. That is a great class. Joey Porter was on hand to address the crowd today during training camp, which is very nice to see. And not only that, but Ike Taylor, who's a part of the team scouting department now, and Troy Polamalu was there as well. So Joey Porter, Ike Taylor, and Troy Polamalu, all part of the team that won the Super Bowl in 2005. We're all at camp today, and you can see them talking and mingling. It was really cool to see that happen. But yeah, really great Hall of Honor class. Marquise Pouncey, obviously one of the best centers of his day, maybe the best center of his era, 9-time Pro Bowler, 2-time first-team All-Pro. Ben comes without any introduction. It's really nice to see him and Marquise Pouncey going together. So very cool to see that announcement today. Joey Porter, Marquise Pouncey, Ben Roethlisberger, the 2025 Hall of Honor class for the Steelers. Very nice. So, but that about wraps it up for day 3 of Steelers coverage. I will not be out there for day 4. I'm going to give myself a little bit of a rest day. It's been a lot of going back and forth and writing and whatnot. But I'm very happy to be back in full swing with all of you. And yeah, getting through this season, and it's off to a very fun start. So like I said, if you have not already left a review for this show, please be sure to do that. Leave a review and a comment. Let me know what you guys think about the show. You might not think it does much for the show, but it actually does helps a lot. So I hope that you will leave a review, leave a comment, and subscribe to Believe on YouTube to watch the shows from the Believe family of networks and shows and everything that we're doing throughout the NFL season. And it's going to be a very, very fun one. So I will see you guys next week for more Believe in Steelers. Until then, take care, and we'll talk soon.